Sam, good to have you on here. Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for reaching out. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad we could do this. Just starting off real strong here. Has your perception of music changed just in a more general sense from when you began making it to now?
100%. Yeah. I mean, perception of music could mean a lot of things, but the
Hmm.
first thing I think of when you ask that question is like, I can remember w- the crazy, mysterious way that music sounded to me when I was a kid getting interested in music, you know? And actually, more than a kid. First 10 or 15 years of making music for me was like, for example, I would listen to Pet Sounds or the Soft Bulletin or something like that, um, and just be so engrossed by the sound and so immersed in it that I would forget to sort of like dissect what I was hearing. And as a young musician, I would just try to emulate it with guitars, bass, and drums as if, you know what, it was just such a magical alchemical stew that I couldn't even yet process that, like, that's a bass clarinet, that's a bass harmonica, that's an accordion doubling an organ. You know what I mean? It was just like, this is magic. How do I do this? And I just go to the practice room and set up with my buddies in the usual way and be like, all right, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. like, you know, so in that sense, like my perception, I think, has become a higher fidelity perception in which I can listen more analytically and understand what I'm hearing, which takes some of the fun out of listening, but reimburses me on the making side. It's much less frustrating to make music with a strong analytical sense.
Yeah, do you suppose that you can't have one without the other, kind of giving some to some and lacking that in the other aspect there?
Um, I wouldn't say that in like in a grave way or as a warning. You know what I mean? Like, I think childlike wonder is its own sort of part of the brain and personality that can be strengthened or developed when it needs to be, you know? So I wouldn't trade like knowledge or understanding for wonder, but I also do think that sort of developing like your joy impulse can kind of balance that out. You know what? You can't go back. You can't
Hmm.
unlearn. I've eaten from the tree of knowledge, but but I still think there's a life worth living to be carved out here as such.
If you say so, that's fine though. Uh, now, when did you begin making music? When did this kind of start for you?
Um, I took up music suddenly when I was 12 years old, and it was started with a recess time conversation with some buddies that we should start a rock band. None of us played instruments, but our rock band should basically parallel Guns N' Roses. And I was like, I'll be Slash. That's I want to be Slash. So um, my parents, who were always very supportive of my creative endeavors as a kid, of which there were many, um, were like, "Yeah, let's get you a guitar. Let's get you a teacher." They were and are awesome like that. Um, so I think I was the only kid of that group of five kids who got an instrument and got the encouragement. Which led me to expand my friend groups to some of the other kids who were playing music and had instruments, and just went from there. I mean, I kind of knew the day I got home with my guitar, like this was something I could pour myself into forever.
And is that the same thing that kind of pushes you now, or has the catalyst changed in some sort of a way?
It's not Guns N' Roses specifically that I'm trying to emulate. A lot of it is habit and identity. It's just what I've been doing for some 35 years now with my time. But I keep finding new avenues that take turns being of the highest interest to me. Back then it was pretty much just trying to improve or quote unquote master the guitar. Um, but I quickly started writing songs more because I was feeling like I want to be an original in an original band. Like all my heroes are in original bands. Cover bands is like this other compromised situation, as I understand it. you know, of course, there's a place for that, and cover bands can be a lot of fun. I now know, but yeah, like it was just like this is how you do it. You get good at the instrument, you write songs so that you have your own material, and started doing all those things. And to your question, is it the same today? Kind of. Only today I've spent you know decades also exploring production and engineering. The past decade I've spent pretty focused on developing my drumming. Um, you know, I've been playing a lot more pedal steel lately. I took up the pedal steel when I was 20, and I've used it on the last four records I've done, and actually did a gig on it the other night. Um,
That was a cover band as well, right?
that was we did one Leuven Brothers cover, but it was mostly originals, but not mine. Um, yeah, so I just find it endlessly wonderful, and there's so much to learn and enjoy, and I'm being a producer has sort of pulled me into wanting to and needing to understand all the ingredients of making a record, and that's only made me want to dive further into every aspect of it, not just guitar playing and the instruments that were my primaries, guitar and bass, but drums and piano and just fleshing out everything. I've even like started working on my singing again. I suddenly became refascinated with like great singing, whereas for years and years I was like, oh, my favorite singers are kind of bad singers. It's fine. And suddenly I'm like very appreciative of like breath control and really accurate pitch and being able to like get lines across with clarity, and so you understand a complex melody that does delivered vocally. It's just interesting and fun to me, you know.
Hmm.
And my taste keeps broadening as a result of learning new things.
Very interesting. Was it apparent when you were younger that say, oh, this is gonna music in general is gonna be a staple of my life moving forward until even now, or maybe even more so now, I'll say.
Yeah, it was apparent the day I got the guitar in my hands. It wasn't apparent as an outsider of music. There was no moment where I listened to music or saw it performed and said, that's exactly where I want to be and what I want to do. But I had done different kinds of creative exploration. I'd done a bit of acting, and I had done a bit of visual art. And when I got the guitar in my hands, I was like, oh, this can scratch that itch forever. I felt it, that there was just, I mean, if I had fully understood the amount had to learn, I probably would have been scared, but scared to begin. But I felt enough of a pull, and had enough ignorance to not be daunted by the grave task of absorbing enough to be make presentable music.
I read that you went to Berkeley College of Music. Is that right?
It is right. You must have gotten down to the second sentence of my Wikipedia page.
Well, I edited it so it's the first, but
Oh, thank you for doing so.
so you went there.
I did. Yeah.
What was that like, and what drew you to that school?
Um, that was a interesting choice. In my junior year of high school, or I guess maybe the early part of my senior year of high school, I was strongly considering not going to college. I'd been gigging around in Houston, Texas, where I grew up, and I was eager to get started as a full time musician. Didn't seem like any of my heroes had gone to college, et cetera, et cetera. And I had an opportunity to join a fairly well known band from Louisiana. This performer, CC Adcock, who's well known regionally. Um, and had put out some records on Island. And he was a guitarist I really admired and was looking for a lead guitarist so he could focus more on singing on stage. Um, so for me at 17, that was like kind of a dream gig, you know? And I was thinking about moving to Louisiana and doing that. And my mom, in a panic, found out about Berklee College of Music and suggested I apply. And I did the whole like scholarship application thing and got some assistance. And that was encouraging, you know, to feel, you know, welcomed and wanted at this school. It sort of corresponded to um, feeling a little bit like, at least at the time in the late 90s, I was maybe running out of runway in Houston for what could be accomplished. You know, I was in high school, but a lot of the people I was gigging with and hanging out with were in their 20s, and I was sort of seeing a bit of a dark future there of heavy drug use and just a life that I didn't really see for myself and that I, you know, wanted to avoid some of the cliches of rock music loserdom. Um, so those things aligned fairly simultaneously. And when I got accepted to Berkeley, I decided to go. And so I've been living in the Northeast since '98 when I started there.
Recent move, I understand. Um, Now, what did you end up studying there?
I was accepted with the intention of studying music performance, which would just be like focus on my instrument, which was guitar. I had been studying with a jazz teacher in Houston who was truly phenomenal, and he'd played with all these incredible people. He played with Dizzy Gillespie, Arnett Cobb, Jewel Brown. Like he was a real guy who just sort of settled in Houston to be near his estranged wife so he could be near his daughter. His name was Clayton Dias, and he's still down there. I recommend checking out his trio in Galveston. He's just a truly great, like old school, you know, bop jazz guitar player. And I was pretty interested in being able to emulate that style. But I was also living in a fantasy world, you know, where I would buy old jazz records and bring them home to my bedroom and just imagine this smoky noir world where this music was being made and was like, God, I want to master this. And then I got to Boston and it's all fluorescent lighting and, you know, classes and exams. And it was like, oh, shit. I don't, if you want to study jazz, I don't think it gets any cooler than studying with Clayton Dias. You know, I think I had the best of this already. I also like just saw the world I was entering. It was sort of like performance as sport, and that didn't appeal to me. I maybe got a little scared too and recoiled from the challenge of like playing as well as these incredible technicians around me. And I quickly rebelled and started writing like sort of post punk songs. and
Hand in hand, sort of a thing. Right, right, right.
Yeah, so I just got sort of scared of long form instrumental music and endless soloing for it. Just the whole scene there. It was like too much of a good thing, and it sort of sent me running the other way. So when I declared a major, I declared music production engineering, which at the time I had no real interest in being anyone's producer other than my own, or anyone's engineer for sure. Probably not even my own. But it was a chance to get some studio time at the school and to learn how to get the recordings to own the character that I was trying to instill in them because I had had a few recording experiences and had found them frustrating in terms of like uh, something I think a lot of people feel early on or maybe forever if they don't get the answers sorted out. But just that the recording process was a flattening of everything that I thought was sort of the spirit, soul, and personality of what I was trying to put on the tape. Back then it was tape.
And now, and it's back to being tape again.
Sometimes I mostly just use tape machines as an effect at this point. I'm pretty comfortable working digitally, but yeah, I digress.
Interesting. Yeah, it that seems to be a lot of people's experience that they're hindered in a sense through their experiences working with more professional people that give them a shot early on, or in your case, in a academic sort of situation there, which I'm working on a theory now. It's like, are they driving people to do this because they know that they'll create something better than they would have if they didn't experience this? This is my new dissertation. I'm formulating it right now. But yeah, that is really disheartening, and it is not the first time I've heard this sort of feeling towards this sort of situation. But everyone who says it, they always create something really interesting. So I don't know whose side to take here, Sam. I'm kind of just figuring it out myself.
Yeah, I mean, and to just to be clear, I'm not saying there was anything sterile about what they were teaching or the way they were teaching it. It was more just like recording is this mysterious thing where I find it quite simple and straightforward to make a cool recording that I and the people I'm working with love. But 30 years ago, it wasn't simple. And I feel like I'm doing the exact same things now. Like, you know, I've only, you, it's this mysterious thing in that you refine and refine for decades and ultimately see that you're like still using the same mic on the kick drum in more or less the same place. You're still doing more or less everything the same. It's just that your ears got better. The only thing that changes is that you are correcting problems because you recognize them as such.
Sort
So
of
I'm not
putting
I'm
out a
not
fire earlier on.
yeah, and those problems can be, objective sonic problems, but they can also be stylistic problems. This is supposed to feel cool, but it's reminding me of Sting. I think it's cuz you're really hammering on that sus2 in your chord. Please stop that. Things like that.
Stuart Copeland listens, so let's just tread a little bit lightly on this whole Sting thing, okay?
The
And
guy's a master. It's just not for me.
Sting, look, we're happy to get your side of the story on whenever you're ready to come on and chat. Let's do it.
I know. I don't want to screw this booking up for you.
Do you feel like you obtained certain information through your years going to Berkeley that you would not have came across otherwise?
Yeah, I think my favorite courses, and I think the ones that I got the most out of, were just the basic harmony and theory classes that everyone was required to take, regardless of their major. And what I liked about that was my teacher, Clayton, we didn't do any sight reading or sheet music. And when I would ask him questions about breaking down theory, he was very reluctant to share it, even though he clearly understood it. I mean, he was playing over giant steps, like he knew what to do. But he didn't want to explain it to me as rules. And I felt sort of out in the wilderness with that. And so, my story is different than a lot of musicians, but I didn't really grasp theory in the most basic way until I was in music school. Until I was in at the college level studying music. Like I didn't know about chords off the major scale, chords off the minor scale. You can switch them around, you can swap them out, you can combine them and use them together. That would be a momentary modulation or whatever. You know, that stuff was so useful as a songwriter and as an accompanist because you can learn so much quicker if you understand those practices and your ear starts to hear, you know, back to that thing of how music sounded so magical to me back in the day. But like, the first time I heard the Beatles hit a four minor chord, it was like, what the fuck is that? that's a crazy chord, you know? And then it becomes a cliche. It's like, can they all be that easy to recognize? You know what I mean? And so that stuff was, I think, the most useful theory and harmony. And I loved it because it applied no matter what, and it was not imposing anything stylistically. Whereas at the age of 18, 19, 20, I felt in my guitar lessons at school like it was going to impose something on my playing that I didn't necessarily want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And the theory is just literacy. It's like you don't have to believe everything you read or agree with everything you read, but here is what a sentence looks like, you know?
Be able to comprehend it and fix it to your own understanding, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be apprehensive if you were put in the case of teaching somebody the fundamentals of music theory as well, the same as your professor was, or do you think that you would have a better grasp on how to explain this to somebody that would be in your position that you were in?
I gave a few lessons to some young neighbors when I was in my 20s, and I think I brought that stuff in too soon, like because I was fascinated with it and found it so useful. But I think I remember the look of my young neighbor's face just glazing over, and she really just wanted to get back to the fretboard and play some chords. So I think I would just try to let it trickle in when it answered a question or solved a problem that they had stumbled upon themselves, and just share as much as answered that question.
I would immediately hit any child over the head with all this information as soon as possible. First question, how'd you make that shape? I'm glad you asked. So look, if we look at all the chords on like a clock, looking at music from an academic perspective, it seems to me, somebody who has not looked at it through an academic perspective, that you gain certain insights from being in that position and being so immersed with it for a number of years and learning so many ins and outs, and this is how you get to this and whatever it may be, yada yada yada. But and I also think that people who don't attend music school or are not as technically proficient musicians also have their own way of viewing and composing a song that somebody who is from an academic background would never think of doing. Do you perceive that to be the same, or do you think that at a certain point, which might be the case, that both these roads intersect in a way, and it doesn't matter what kind of background you're into, but there's going to be a point where these two lines merge.
They definitely merge in my experience. And sort of like we talked about earlier in the conversation, you can't unlearn. And I definitely know some songwriters who uh, sort of guard their ignorance about, in quotes, how music works. And I'll also put ignorance in quotes. These are people I respect and love working with, you know. Um, but for them, if they really understood what was happening with the theoretical mechanics, the harmonic mechanics of why this part they created in an open-tuned guitar is happening, they don't want to know that. They're like, I stumbled on this. That's my process. If I have all this other stuff informing it, like it'll it'll change it or fuck it up. Like these songs come to me when I let my hands fiddle about on an open tuned guitar and I don't want to know. I've worked with a lot of people like that and it's very rewarding. Um, Also, if those people don't want to play alone, it's really helpful if their accompanists do know theory and music and have good ears. Not to tell them they're doing it wrong or to explain to them what they're doing, but to understand how to fall in with it, and complement it in a way that doesn't take forever to learn because the singer songwriter playing this strange part can't explain it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So they need to work with someone who has the tools to hear and play along. And if everyone is sort of doing this self-taught thing, you're likely to run into a frustrating situation. I guess what I'm saying is like one savant per band. It helps to have someone more technical or with more technical ability. I hate when people oversimplify it as if people who are technically proficient in music are incapable of being creative, or that they did this because they have no soul or creativity. Like Chick Corea, you know, is super creative and can play the fuck out of the keyboard. Like it's both things. Um, so I sort of resent it when people cast me as their technician. Um, and the unlearned songwriter, may do something very awesome and very enjoyable and very valuable, but they're not versatile, even within their own body of work usually. And that's not a criticism; that's an observation.
Yeah, an incorrect one, but it's fine. Looking back on it now, do you feel that uh, that point of going to Berkeley, that time really um yielded a lot of uh creativity and kind of pointed you in the direction of where you are today? Or do you feel like a lot of things outside of your time in school gave you the opportunity of what you have gone on to create and continue to?
Yeah, I mean, primarily that. I'm 46 and I've been making music since I was 12. So, those 4 years.
Were really pivotal and the most important. I understand.
Exactly. No, no, it was good information. It helped. Like everything in life, I can't say how important was it. It just being in Boston was important. That's where I met the people that I made music with for the next 10 years. Everything you do is just that's what you're doing now.
Hmm.
So there's no going back. But yeah, it was certainly pivotal. Um, but I think as a student, I've actually been much more open at other times in my life, more recently, primarily to like really being open to learning. I think there I was somewhat guarded about what I did and didn't want to learn, and maybe probably could have learned more, worked harder in certain areas that I would have been more curious about now, for sure. Um, yeah, just because I think that's a classic. Get more curious as you get older, or more open to learning. I know a lot of people who wish they could do college now, or do it again, or do some further education.
Hmm. Right, and that's just with time, as you just mentioned. Now, in terms of in an alternate reality of where you went to Louisiana to pursue the music there at that point, do you think that you would have it would have led you to the position that you're in now, more or less?
Very hard to say. It's likely I wouldn't live in the Northeast. It's likely I wouldn't be married to who I'm married to and have the same children that I have. Um, so those would be what I would consider big losses. Um, would I have sort of developed from playing in bands to producing? It's quite possible, you know. It all depends on the opportunities that arise and the things that took place. But so it surely would have played out differently. Um, but I have noted lately that putting it all together has always been my favorite part of it all. Making music. Um, I think I still write songs so that I can make a record, as opposed to like a yearning to share my story in any mode or sound that happens to fit the song. Like, I take songwriting very seriously, and I mostly do it now with others, like helping them with their songs. But when I write, I kind of just wait for some epiphanous thing to come out of my mouth, because love the process of slaving away on words and those ideas from scratch as I do being in the studio every day and making something with even a seed of potential into something really cool. That's something I can do every day if I show up for work. Whereas if I were to be like a songwriter, like, working in an office 9 to 5, I don't, I can't see myself cracking the code of how to do that well every day, all day. It's still like, that's just not the, do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
I do understand what you're saying.
get their job and still do it beautifully. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? I don't have that relationship with songwriting. Like, they come when they come, or if you put a song in front of me, I could tell you how I think you could make it better. But production, every day, I can figure out the best arrangement and way to record whatever is in front of me. Period. I have better days than other days. Sometimes the chemistry's better, but every day I can do that job, you know, at a C plus or above.
Passable. It's passable at the very least. And
Which is to say, yeah,
I mean, that's pretty good.
to answer your question, it feels like I should have ended up here. So,
And here you
if
are.
there's a metaverse and I'm on that trajectory somewhere, I hope that that's what I'm doing.
Going back to, I believe that you were hinting towards this specific group a little bit earlier, but Apollo Sunshine, was
Mhm.
that the group that was kind of formed during your time or right after your time at Berkeley?
Yeah, yeah, during. Um yeah, and that was like, if Berkeley was where I learned like the bare bones of like how music works harmonically, um Apollo Sunshine was where I learned how bands work functionally. We were like ultra democratic, two songwriters. We both sang. The three of us were a super tight unit. At times we were four or five, but there was three at the core. And yeah, we worked really hard. We toured really hard. We gave up our apartments. It was a super kind of, I don't want to say punk rock ethos because I don't know why they own this concept, but it was like we kind of gave up all our possessions and like hit the road for a long time. More
Yeah.
like a rock and roll monk.
I just want to let that sit for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. I like it. I'm not really sure what it means, but I like it nonetheless. A
We were
rock
just
and roll
doing it all the
monk.
way. It was like, I mean, it was an actual like finding America experience. I got to spend my 20s running around in America that still had regional diversity, and everything didn't come down to like who you voted for. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if you met like a person who was rural and owned guns and served in the military, you were just like, "Oh wow, we're so different." But it was fun when he let us stay the night and we shot skeet and he made us steaks and we drank beer. Like, politics didn't come up. You know
Are
what I
you
mean?
really that different when it comes to it? Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of one guy specifically in Terre Haute, Indiana, who helped us get our vegetable oil run tour van working again, and he put us up for the night while he did so. He was called Thompson Diesel, and he was out in a cornfield, and he had a
I'm
spot
sorry,
for
his name was
catfish bait.
Thompson Diesel? Is that what you
Thompson
said?
Diesel was his shop. His name was
Oh,
Thompson was his last name, and I
okay.
can't remember his first name.
I apologize. I thought that he was a descendant of Diesel.
Rudolph
I,
Diesel, who
was it
died
is
under
it
mysterious circumstances. Yes.
Yeah, and also we're gonna get into that later on. But anyways, join us at the Patreon.
Great diesel mechanic, and
Hmm.
that vegetable oil vans, if you know anything about that, require a diesel engine to to operate on that fuel. Anyway, we were doing that for a while, and we were in a pinch, and he helped us out and was like an awesome host, and we had a great time with him. And I was talking with Jesse, one of my bandmates from Apollo Sunshine, recently about how like we were reminiscing on that and how it just probably wouldn't have happened now. He would have been more dubious of us and we more dubious of him. And it's a shame.
To say the least,
Yeah.
of both parts. Yeah, it's well, that is a very unique time frame of that happening, kind of right before it started to switch, whatever that switch is. I'm not implying that I understand the the social impact of being more vocal about who you voted for, whatever it is politically, but that is interesting, and that seems to be kind of around the time of the beginning of the worm turning, if you will, or something more negative.
There's a sense now that like everyone who falls on the other side is sort of irredeemable,
Mm.
and I don't feel that way. I think people just have these alternate realities um, that used to be bridged more often for whatever reason, you know.
I think that was very well put. So what you're saying was that you were trying to sow seeds of mistrust between every state and just being a agent of chaos in that time.
Yeah, now they call us paid agitators, but
That's the word I'm
at
looking
the
for.
time this was a whole new industry.
Breaking ground.
Yeah, yeah, we got in on the ground floor.
Do you feel like that band Apollo Sunshine had a different energy behind it, not only because it was the first band or group that you were involved with outside of your time in college, but did it feel more legitimate, I guess, for lack of a better term?
It was the first experience working with a record label. It was the first experience touring far and wide. So yeah, it was a legitimizing experience on that level. We were also quite sure of ourselves and felt that we were a more legitimate band than most other bands working at that time, by virtue of living together and playing so much. And we had a sort of we had this odd indie machismo, um, even though we were like, you know, it was a different kind of thing, but we had this crazy energy that could go dark, but was mostly bright, and it was a lot of fun. Like many democratic experiments, it went dark at the end. We were as our lives grew in different directions, and we were all sort of trying to make it work with this band as our sole provider. It got very tense, but there were years of like just sort of ecstatic collaboration and creation that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Fantastic. Now, after the disbanding of Apollo Sunshine, did that lead you? Did you jump directly into Yellowbirds? Was that your trajectory there?
Pretty much. I had started writing that first Yellowbirds album while we were still working as Apollo Sunshine. There's even a few of our last gigs we were doing one or two of those songs. Um, like actually, Jesse found a tape of a gig recently where we were doing "In Our World," which is on that first Yellowbirds record. But that's something I started doing after I moved to New York, and we still continued as a band for about 2 years after we ceased living together in a farmhouse in Western Mass, which is where we set up shop after a year or so touring without a home base. Yeah, and then things started to pull apart a bit, and I went to New York where my sister was living, and that was kind of I was really finding I was getting frustrated working so closely with partners, but like having to have it be within this tension of living in different cities and tension of our lives growing apart. And I was really taking solace in just like making these recordings alone and really enjoying the demoing process, and started to feel like, God, if these demos didn't sound like shit, I would love it if they were the record, which is how I became a producer. um, but that record came out okay, and I sort of stuck with that ethos. Got a lot of help from mentors who had already decided that engineering was an important thing, and 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 basically, after those first two Yellowbirds records is when um, a career as a producer started sort of organically unfolding. People just, I'd never had as much success with anything since Apollo Sunshine in terms of like sheer volume of attention or reviews or ticket sales or whatever. But but the people who sort of come out of the woodwork and let me know they're fans of what I've made ever since that time have been, fortunately, musicians looking to make records. And that's kind of how I slowly pivoted from a performer, then a performer doing some production, then a producer doing some performance, to a producer who sometimes plays a gig or so, you know.
Very interesting. Taking a step back for just one moment, were you surprised by what you were producing on your own in those earlier days of of this new project? Were you surprised by what was coming out of you?
Yeah, because it was a different voice than the one I'd had in Apollo Sunshine.
Hmm.
Both literally and figuratively. Like I think I found a way to sing that uh, we just I wasn't finding the right keys for myself to sing in Apollo Sunshine. We sang real high, is like the Beatles do it, that's where we should do it. It's like it was too high for my range, and we were trying to do that. And Jesse, I sounded great, and I listened to those my voice on those records, and I'm like, I had not figured it out yet what to do. A little bit on the last one on Shall Noise Upon, I was starting to figure that out. And then with Yellowbirds, when I got to do this whole world of my own, it was just like, there was a sort of like bombastic power that we were going for in Apollo Sunshine. And with Yellowbirds, I felt very relieved to get to do something more understated. I mean, that first Yellowbirds record is actually pretty bombastic compared to anything I've made since, but it was my transition. Um, and yeah, just finding literally the voice to sing in, but also like just exploring stuff that I hadn't been like pulling from really in Apollo Sunshine, like more. I love Roy Orbison, and that was like a huge influence on that first Yellowbirds record. But he has a writing on his most classic songs that is like almost through composed. It's not like this verse chorus thing, it's like this inevitable trajectory from beginning to end that's like easy to remember and makes sense as a listener, but like then you learn the song and you're like, these sections never repeat. This is just this like story. I was really influenced by that.
That's really interesting. Sam, I'm gonna have to really take in what you said at when I'm editing this later on. I'm gonna go,
Check
huh,
out like Crying or In
yeah.
Dreams. You had asked if I was surprised by my output at the time, and yes, because a lot of new things were coming out of me, a lot of new influences were being distilled, and I was also like, that was the beginning of my relationship with my wife Sarah, who is a designer and visual artist, and she turned me on to a whole world of visual influences, and we were living together and trying to make our little apartment nice and cute and building our own stuff to do so. And she got me into making like stop motion collage animation to accompany the videos and things. um, so it was just like a really, again, just a super creative time, but in a different way, where I really got to be like the sole master of the world, with a lot of help from the masters around me, Sarah and my friend Travis Harrison, who helped me do 1 or 2 days of recording some of the basics for the color, and my friend Dan Goodwin, who like answered all my questions about like engineering early on. And
I didn't want to cut you off. I felt like there was somebody else that you were trying to think of, but those
oh,
are the,
there's
hey,
everyone I've ever met.
okay.
But those are some big ones. I sometimes make it sound too much like I made the color like at home in my apartment, which I did a lot of it that way. But Travis Harrison was also key to it all working, I think.
Uh, do you feel like certain songs, maybe like earlier songs of this band, or certain modes of creativity can only be accomplished through primarily working alone or working alone for a lot of the time. Do you feel like these things can only happen that way for certain people? Like this is only achievable, or something different like this is only achievable if you sit down with yourself and start to produce something on your own.
Yes. For me, that is a big part of my creative process. Um, in my last few records, um, I set about to defy that and did somewhat, like especially on tracks on my last record, Slow Fawn Music #2. Um, got into a process with Kochemea for the tracks that we did together, and with Stuart Bogey for the tracks that we did together. But notably, that's mostly instrumental stuff. And then I created some interstitial vocal songs to sort of tie these pieces together and make it flow as a record. Those I did alone. Yeah, for me, songwriting and arranging a song is this lonely process. So there's a balance of wanting to pull in the genius of my friends and community, but not being able to get to the core of what I'm trying to express with other people in the room, especially if it involves lyrics and vocals. That's just been the big part of my story. In a lot of the people I work with who come to me to produce them, a big uh, a whole number of the records I do are just me and the songwriter. And in a lot of cases, they are not themselves multi instrumentalists. So maybe they most likely play guitar, sometimes piano, mostly guitar. So, and we'll talk about how should we make this record. I'm like, well, there's a few ways we could put a crack band together, track live, or we could do it just you and I, and you do what you do. Maybe we'll hone that a little bit with, work on the song, tighten it up, and then just I'll record you to a drum machine or a loop or a click, and then I'll add everything else. And the number of people who are relieved at that suggestion, that there's only going to be one other person in the room and it's going to be me, I think sort of speaks to what we were just talking about. There's like an intimacy of whatever is happening, and a lot of these records tend to be comprised of more like confessional, memoiristic writing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, in the more sort of wild, sonically adventurous stuff, you might bring in any number of people, but then there's also a lot of those types of records too end up getting made in steps and layers because you can put all mental energy into the aspect of the record that you're working on right now, right? So if I'm working with something and it's not singer songwriter confessional type music, say it's more like a Peter Gabriel, like wild sonic kind of record, we still might track the basics, just like some outline of the song, bass and drums. Then we can really listen and make sure we're getting this groove just right, with enough of the song on top to let us know that it's matching the intent and the emotion of the song. But then, because we're making something that's meant to be wild and sonic, we don't want the guitar player to just play the first thing that comes to them through a guitar in a booth under the stairs in the other room that's bleeding a little bit onto the drums, and we can replace it, but you still hear a little bit of the old part that was shitty and we've changed it and moved on. You know, what we want is some mind-blowing new guitar part that no one would play off the top of their head. You know what? And it's very hard to orchestrate all that in real time in the same room without so much repetition that the artist completely loses the plot of what it is they're trying to do. Um, so the only times I record live in a room are when that's actually what we want it to be and sound like. And I actually just got back from Kentucky, Harlan, Kentucky, where I was making a record just like that. And the artist rented out this cool lodge at a place called the Pine Mountain School, and we had written the record together. It's like artist is called Ismay, and uh, she was pulling from Appalachian folk songbook, like traditional stuff, but really just for like characters, snippets of melodies, cool song titles, and then we rewrote it all into this like narrative story. And we did way more pre-production in co-writing than I usually do on a record. Where I think we worked for like 4 days just writing. No recording other than iPhone demos and things like that. So then the idea was that we're making this folk-inspired thing. But even though it's Appalachian folk, wouldn't it be cooler if it sounded more like Pentangle and Fairport Convention? So we tried to like adopt a similar process to them and just rehearse the band and then went and recorded it. And that went really great. But barring that, where the singer is like, that is the atmosphere I want to sing into, uh, it often just works best with the least amount of people necessary to do it. And since I play a lot of instruments, that can be a very small number.
Right. Going back just for one moment, I do like the sweatshirt. I I want to put that on record. Harlan, Kentucky,
Isn't that great?
Coal Miner Central.
I got this from the caretaker of the Pine Mountain School. I complimented her on it in the morning when we were having breakfast. And then I saw her later in the afternoon and complimented her again and was like, "So where can one get a sweatshirt like that?" And she said, "Oh,
I'm also wondering.
you can't get these anymore." But she used to work at the convention center, and she said she had 6 of them and that I could take this one. So she gave me the Harlan, Kentucky sweatshirt off her back, and I'm super grateful.
You're telling me there's 5 more in existence, so that's just a good lead.
Those are heather and blue. I liked this one because it reminded me of Iowa Hawkeyes colors, which makes me think of
Well, I
that
think
band.
that's kind of counterproductive if you're asking me. I'm not trying to get into an argument here, but we're talking about Harlan just for 1 second, Sam. Uh, it is very interesting that you have uh, walked all of these different paths in music. I think that is pretty darn special that you've had your hand in all these different aspects. Well, one that we didn't talk about yet was you also you've done some session work for other people being brought into the studio.
Mm-hmm.
What is that like, kind of being brought in, not so much working directly with a an artist in a producer role, but being told like, hey, how about you play something like this? What is that like for you? Do you also enjoy that aspect?
Yeah, I do. I do a lot less of that now.
Hmm.
Um, I see again, like my Wikipedia would make it seem that
No, I just understand that you've done it before. I'm not saying that you're actively doing it now. Right now, you're on the podcast, but I asked that to just kind of round out this arc, if you will, of your whole uh journey throughout music has just touched all of these different bases.
yeah,
And it's very fascinating that all these facets kind of bleed into your experience within music. I don't think I've talked to anybody who has had their hand in all these different areas. And if I have, I apologize. I don't mean to offend anybody who has also done this, but nevertheless, it's a very rare thing. I perceive, because I've talked to a lot of people on here, but for you to hit all these different points is very impressive.
I think it's I think it's probably rarer in the sort of indie world where I sort of fall as an artist and with a lot of what I produce, and yet um, a few circumstances have led to playing as a sideman on with artists of a different sort of echelon, which is probably what you're referring to. But it all happened really organically. Like in when I was living in New York and transitioning from playing in Apollo Sunshine to doing Yellowbirds and starting to produce, etc. Um, I had a good friend. He's in LA now, John Hill, but he was in New York at the time, and he had just sort of had a big promotion as a producer, so to speak. He had done the Santi Gold record back when she was Santo Gold, and it was like a big breakthrough for her and for him. Um, and he had his own studio, and we were old buds. And so he started hiring me for some things, and had me come in and play a bunch of stuff on the Shakira She Wolf record that he produced in large part, and then a couple of other things. And so that sort of got those credits out there in the world. And then, interestingly, when I made my first solo record, which is called Cool It, Um, in a similar way to like Yellowbirds Records not doing a whole lot in the marketplace more broadly, but artists being interested. Danger Mouse got a copy of that record and really got kind of infatuated with it enough so that he reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in co-producing some things with him, which like was really surprising out of the blue. Like it seemed like he was perfectly capable of producing without me and could simply hire me to play or whatever. But I came to find, and we're good friends now. That's just the generous kind of guy that he is. So through him, I've played on like Broken Bells records and Gnarls Barkley records, and and played with all these people or produced all these people when we did that the Resistance Radio record. Where I got to produce tracks for Nora Jones, Sharon Van Etten, Beck, and a whole slew of. There's 18 tracks, all different singers on that. I get to like be a secret agent in the world of big shots as a undercover representative of small potatoes people like myself.
That is a really really interesting sort of path you've been on. Going back to your solo work. Now, I did want to ask you this specific question here. Is what you're doing now, releasing music underneath your own name, is that an extension of what Yellowbirds was doing, or could you have seen songs that you're producing now come out under Yellowbirds, or do you look at this as a complete separation between the two,
Um,
as you
it,
would Apollo Sunshine, just to clarify that?
it's more of a continuation because the
Mhm.
the process of making Yellowbirds records was actually pretty similar. There's other people involved. They lend their talents in unique and beautiful ways that heighten the record, and it's also largely me working alone on it and pulling it all together. That's been more or less how I've been making records since The Color, the first Yellowbirds record, through the last 6 albums I've done. Two Yellowbirds and the last 4 Sam Cohen records. And the Slow Fawn Music records I think of as more collaborative, even though they're Sam Cohen records. So much so I don't even put my name on the cover. But in streaming world, they're in my catalog. And then those tracks also appear in the various collaborators, whatever, IPs you want to call
Columns,
that.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that part of the process hasn't changed. I mean, I think the music has changed, but if I were still calling myself Yellowbirds, that would still be true. I mean, Yellowbirds was never really a band. There was a point where it almost became one, and then I think I got sort of scared of being tethered to a band, a little bit of like PTSD from having been in an ultra democratic band, and was about to have my wife was about to have our first child, and at the time I was still sort of really looking at my career as a performer and album maker as something that was hoping to take all the way to being my full-time occupation, and I was concerned that with various members starting families and whatnot that I was sort of like um, condemning myself to a life of weekend warriorhood. If I had known then how it was all going to play out, I would have kept those wonderful people in my band and gladly been a weekend warrior, and we could still play gigs on the weekends because, as it turned out, I am a producer who kind of does my own music as a hobby anyway. But I rolled the dice and went it alone starting at that point, just because my feeling at the time um, was that I needed to be somewhat more agile to sort of see if there were opportunities I could tease out of um, that aspect of my career.
Are you surprised by just the whole trajectory of where music has brought you from when you started, from I believe when you said you were 12 years old to now? Are you does it kind of floor you that you've been able to work in all these different capacities and have these all different experiences and work with these different people? Did you expect something like this to happen?
No, this isn't what I pictured, but I'm super grateful that this is how it played out. And when I look back, there were clues along the way that point to this being a good idea and this being a good way for it to go. Um, yeah, I mean, no, I did not think that I would, live outside of a city completely, which is my favorite way to live, and be able to build my own studio and have people message me as strangers, come make a record with me, leave as friends, and have this be the thing that sustains me in life is just like, I feel very, very fortunate to be doing what I'm doing, and I feel pretty lucky that that my first goals, what I was just talking about really wanting to be, known and working as an artist and performer exclusively. I'm really glad that what happened instead was something that allows me to work on new music all the time, work with new people all the time, be with my family pretty much all the time. Um, make my recording space what I want it to be, work on all the various instruments that I love to play, study all the aspects of recording, producing, and engineering that I love to study, have a great community here. Not that some of these things can't be done as a touring musician, but I just see everything about the way my life played out as like a real gift, and I'm glad I failed right into this very sweet spot that I find myself in.
That is a gift, Sam. And this episode has been a gift. So thank you.
I'm honored you were interested enough to let me yap. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. But before I let you go, we got some promo to do here. So Sam's music is streaming everywhere, wherever people get their music, that's where they can find you, right?
Hmm.
Awesome. And that's also including all the work that is not under his name, but maybe he helped produce or sessioned on, whatever. That's kind of the using that as an umbrella term. That the Beck, I think, is the up and coming guy that you said you mentioned that you worked with.
Well, it's
Like,
just one song.
yeah,
He's an album of covers.
I mean, that guy might blow up. So, like, I don't know,
Keep
check
an
him
eye
out.
out for him.
Keep an eye out for him. And people can purchase your work through your website at samcohenmusic.com. That's the best place, right?
Yeah, that's direct from me. And if you order a vinyl, I always send a little note inside and thank you for the order.
And those are AI notes, right? It's not
Of
you
course.
writing. Okay.
No, I don't have time for that.
And people could stay up to date with everything else by following you on Instagram, right? Is that the best place to
For now. We didn't get into a talk of the tech world of the music industry at large, which I have thoughts about. But yeah,
join us on the Patreon? We're gonna be naming names. All that fun stuff is at Sam Cohen Manimal. That's Manimal on Instagram for now. Uh, I mean, and that's up right now. So hopefully by the time this comes out, it's still up. So if it's not on me.
I won't take it down. It's until we all leave together.
Okay. All right.
But I have canceled my Spotify subscription. I do recommend all your listeners do that and move to Tidal.
Tidal. It's Tidal, correct?
It sounds a lot better. They treat artists a lot better, and it's not owned by anyone who was in the front row of Trump's inauguration. So,
In full disclosure, it does sound like title, but it's
yeah,
Tidal.
tidal,
I
like a tidal
do.
wave.
That's also a very important thing to clarify in this political climate. Tidal, not Title.
More attractive user interface. I made the switch and I was happy, and I recommend everyone who loves music do so.
Did we miss anything that we had to mention? Uh, promotion wise.
No, I'm not promoting anything right now,
Okay.
fortunately.
Besides title,
I guess so. I guess
Tidal.
so. I
Okay.
guess so.
Well, hey, Sam, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being on here, sir. I'm gonna stop recording this and I'll talk to you in a minute, all right?
All right, take care. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me. Bye.